Welcome to the Developing Life podcast, where we celebrate the human stories behind creative journeys. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, someone we've all come to know, love, and support, Tru Adams, a brand vocalist, insanely talented designer, and founder of Tru at Art. Tru's work goes so much deeper than aesthetics. She helps brands discover and share their soul, their truth, and their story. Her designs don't just look good, they resonate, connecting deeply with audiences in a way that's honest, bold, and human. What's so inspiring about Tru is her journey. Over the last 5 years, she has built an incredible career as a self taught designer, rooted in her mission to craft inclusive and transformative narratives. She has consistently shown up not just for her clients and her community, but for her own growth, evolving with grit and staying true to her values every step of the way. In this episode, hosted by Heather Crank, Tru opens up about balancing artistry and purpose, navigating big transitions, and setting bold goals for the future. She reminds us that storytelling isn't just a tool for branding, it's a way to connect authentically, to bridge the gap between what we feel and what we share. If you've ever felt the weight of imposter syndrome, struggled with aligning your work to your heart, or needed a reminder that creativity is a journey worth embracing, this conversation is exactly what you need. Let's dive into the voice within and learn from one of the most soulful, consistent, and inspiring creatives you'll ever meet.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Tru, welcome to the Developing Life podcast.
So excited to be here, Heather.
I know this is big for you to do this. And first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to be able to interview you. For those who don't know you and maybe haven't been following your journey, you and I met not too long ago through Eric Moore, and actually that's how the Developing Life happened. And our great fearless leader, Devron, brought us all together. And we have kind of grown and developed together. And I am just so thrilled to watch you blossom. So, with that said, let's get into it. You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I know a little bit about you, but some people may not. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? What's your beginning of your life experience?
Well, born and raised in South Jersey, and I always deflect and say not the shore. Actually a little closer to Philadelphia area than I am to the shoreline. But yes, except for a brief period of time where I was in Central Texas. I spent my entire life here in Jersey. Grew up in a pseudo urban neighborhood, youngest in the neighborhood. So, I was like the baby regardless of where I was. And yeah, I was the really quiet, weird kid. Kept to myself a lot. I stuck close to family, but I only had like one or two friends. So I was in my head a lot, growing up, which probably explains a whole lot the way that I am today. But yeah, so the my growing up was very resourceful, and I think in growing up in a area where we have kind of limited means, it made me very creative in the things that I wanted to do and try to accomplish. So, I think it definitely built me up to be that kid that just kind of made stuff happen as any way possible at that time, because things weren't afforded to us. Yeah.
So do you think that you were naturally creative, or do you think it was just a response to your environment, or do you think it was both?
I think it might be a little bit of both, because if I were to compare myself to my sister, who is completely left-brained, as
Mhm.
opposed to my right brainedness. And we both grew up together our entire lives, and she was what I would have considered back then so much smarter than me, so much more practical than I was, and understood and I loved and admired that about her. And for a very long time, I almost felt like that made me a little less than,
Mm.
because, like, I was so wildly abstract,
Mhm.
and a lot of that wasn't as nurtured, especially, going through school.
Oh.
You go there to be academic, and
Mhm,
I
mhm.
was clearly not that. Just because my way that my brain worked just wasn't anything that was really focused on, so I didn't have a chance to grow and expand and develop with support. You know what I mean? Because it just wasn't understood. So I that probably also was why I kinda kept to myself a lot, but,
Are you in touch with your sister now?
oh, all the time. All the time. We have actually a what is probably unconventionally close relationship we've had our entire lives.
Mm.
As opposite as we are,
Mhm.
we've never been not connected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you started out probably naturally creative, and then your environment kind of reinforced that creativity, which made you a little bit different. How did you jump then from being creative and being in the environment you grew up in into fitness? Like, what? How does that transition happen?
So, with coming into fitness, and I did it for 20 years full time. And before then, I was in retail management and I did administrative work because I secretly had like a business attire fetish. But the fitness came, the fitness came almost out of necessity for
Mhm,
me. At the time, I was in Texas with
mhm,
my then husband, and he was in the military.
mhm.
So there were times that, he was always away, he was out in the field and so on and so forth. And then 9/11 happened and
Oh,
he was sent to the crypt. He went overseas. And I
wow.
was left with two small children, uh,
Yeah,
in a town, military town that at that time, I mean, we're talking over 20 years ago, it wasn't as developed as that area is now. So no real friends, absolutely no family, and no really secure unit. And in order for me to not lose my mind,
mhm.
I wrapped up the kids and I went to the gym and just worked out for the entire morning just to keep my mind occupied, to keep me from, not feeling lonely or insecure that I was out here on my own, more or less, or, things like that. And that literally saved my life, being there. And I did everything. I took classes, I started lifting weights, I started boxing. I was a boxer, and I'm validating the fact that I was a boxer because my trainer did hit me in the face. So I qualify. I was a boxer.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He said he was sorry. It was fine. But so that literally saved my entire existence. Like, I was not coping well being out there on my own, and that was something that grounded me, um,
Mhm.
to the point where I felt so relieved and strengthened and inspired that my only response to that was to be able to do that for someone else.
Right.
And I started studying and got my first certification in
Mhm.
personal training, and that's how the whole thing started. So it was me paying it forward, for
Right.
what fitness gave me, and that peace of mind, and like I said, that grounding. I
Mhm.
wanted that for everybody else that I could connect with. So
Wow.
yeah.
So you have a humanitarian bent in addition to the creativity and the fitness and
I always said if I didn't know what I wanted to do, or, what occupation I would end up in, I always said that I was a had a heart for service.
Mhm.
regardless of what that looked like. And I
Mhm.
think I get that from my mom.
Mm.
She is definitely a giving person, and she's done so much extending of her heart and her grace and her service that it definitely rubbed off on me. And
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
is the way that I wanted to show up in this world,
That's
so yeah.
that's beautiful, True.
It's
So, okay, so you're in fitness
Mhm.
and you're working through your own issues and you're deciding you want to give back. And then there's another transition where you decide it's time to leave fitness. So, what happened?
After 20 years, it was time.
Mhm.
And it was and there's I'm sure there's many more out here that do that, but when I started, fitness, like being a trainer or a group exercise instructor or what have you, was like your part-time gig. I was in it full time. Like
Wow.
I treated it like a 9 to 5. And so 20 years of that being your 9 to 5 on top of
Mhm.
not only you teaching others, but you're training yourself, and it was just a lot on my body.
Yeah.
That, after 20 years, I felt like, if I still wanted to walk, I might have to hang it up. And quite honestly, after 2 decades, I did want to transition into something a little bit more on the educational side,
Oh.
which I started doing at the last facility that I was at, where I would actually teach other up and coming instructors,
Mhm.
and prep them so they can also get certified. And I was really hoping that that would be kind of the box that I would live in, but it didn't quite work out. So it did push the idea in my head that, like, well, maybe this is needs to come to an end. And yeah, so after 20 years, and I kind of miss it, but it was time. It was time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. So if you're so now you're moving into you're transitioning again. Another big transition is you're
Yes.
moving back into the thing that you found when you were little, which is being a creative person. And you've told me this has been sort of a lifelong desire that you
Mhm.
didn't give yourself permission to explore.
Yeah.
So how are you moving into that?
It felt like a complete 180, and I a part of me still feels unprepared for it all because I
Hmm.
taught myself. But yeah, it was always something that my brain was wired to do.
Hmm.
So I felt really compelled to tap into it and to explore it as much as I could, again, regardless of the resources that I had to make it happen.
Hmm.
Um, but the weirdness, the abstract, all of the things that I really found joy in,
Hmm.
I was able to find a way to express that could be seen and appreciated
Hmm.
without me actually having to be involved. So it was a really good way to kind of show people who I was,
Hmm.
without actually having like this big face-to-face conversation, because
Hmm.
peopling was really hard. It's still hard. But it was a great avenue or outlet for me, to be able to do that and show up in a way that was comfortable for me,
Hmm.
but was still able to connect and impact and hopefully make a difference. So I started playing around with a lot of it, while I was still teaching
Mm.
and training, um, playing around with designs and design concepts and ideas. And what I first did with that before I moved 100% into design is that I used to create leggings, which kind of fit because I was in the fitness industry. So yeah, fitness leggings, there you go. So
Yeah.
I would like just come up with designs that at the time I had not an inkling of knowledge about how to create things. Like I didn't have at that time Adobe or anything like that. I literally had this app called, I'm gonna call, oh, now I'm so afraid of saying this because they're like, you. So there was this app. I don't even know if it still exists. It was called PixArt.
Oh, I know.
PixArt. and it was on your phone. Like, it was just a phone app that just had a
Right.
whole lot of different, like, images and patterns and
Yeah.
icons and things like that. And I would just slap them together. So I'm like on my phone, like, and then
Yeah.
would expand it and put this on clothing. And that was the way that I could express all the weirdness in my head, because I would just, like, randomness would just be like whatever came out, whatever in my
Mhm.
head just came out on fabric. And yeah, that's what I did for a while to kind of feed, the creative beast in me, until I made the complete decision to say, this is what I want to move forward into doing full time.
Do you think there's a connection between the creativity and fitness? Like, was there a line you could draw between the 2?
If it was a line, it would go like several times over. But I just think just the way that I taught, because I wasn't a gym bro mentality.
Right.
It was, for me, it was always about the way that people felt afterwards, not so much the aesthetics. Like, that was just a side effect of it. But
Mhm.
I really wanted people to feel stronger and more capable. And the way that I did that, I think, is what really made me tap even deeper into my creativeness to get those things across. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
just a simple picking stuff up and putting things down for me. I wanted something that would kind of stick with people.
Mhm.
Um, Make sure that the message was heard and
Mhm.
felt, and it was
Mhm.
something that they could take with them.
Mhm.
So it was, I came up with a whole bunch of crazy things over those years. And I remember, and this is so silly, but I remember the year that the Hunger Games came out,
Oh, uh-huh.
that series. So the day it was released, I was in the movie theater that day
Wow.
with a notepad.
Oh my god.
And anything that sparked my interest that I saw them do, I would just, like, jot down. And in my head, I was like, how could I change this to a fitness program? Like, what do I
Wow.
do? So and then the next day or the day after that, I had, like, this full circuit of just big, like, wait, so Katniss was an archer, right? Like, that was her main skill set.
Mhm.
So I had my students, like, mimic that with, like, a cord, like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
this is cord, and, like, act like that they're pulling. And oh my gosh, it was just so fun. Like, the weirder the better. Like, and I feel like that was the way that I like to be there for
Mhm.
my people, like, as many different out of the box ways to get them,
Mhm.
into their strength. That's what I wanted to do. And that made me happy.
So you're a natural conceptual thinker. That just comes naturally to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's makes perfect
I
sense.
love
Perfect sense.
conceptual thinker, because I just keep saying weird, but
Oh,
I like conceptual. We're gonna go with that from now on.
yeah, well, that's what you're doing. You're taking
Yeah.
concepts and then you're applying them to different mediums, which makes you prime for a creative job.
Uh,
Yeah, it does. Um, one other amazing thing I noticed about you, when we first started working together is that you have this incredible voice. And I was
uh,
listening to you once. Actually, I was playing you in my kitchen, and my husband and I were there. And he turned to me and he's like, "Wow, she has a natural talent for voice." And I'm like,
oh,
"I
nice.
know." And so I started talking to you about it, and, you were gracious enough to do our trailer for the podcast, and you're kind of flirting with the VO world a little bit. So I'd
Yeah.
like to talk to you about your voice
Yeah.
and not only what it can do in the world, but also your personal voice and where you'd like to go and where you see yourself.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to officially blame you on record. is your fault that I'm even entertaining this at all because I would have never. But funny story, like I it's so funny that people say that they love the sound of my voice.
Mhm.
But it was not always like that. As a matter of fact, the entire 20 years of my fitness career, I actually sounded a lot like a Klingon because I was so vocal during classes and so hyper and just so on 100 every single class that I would go hoarse weekly,
Wow. Wow.
to the point where I actually damaged my vocal cords and actually had surgery because of it. So
No.
yeah. So it's I'm actually there's no proof that the voice that I have now, which I've always had a lower register, but I feel even after surgery, after all those years of like
Mhm.
persistent damage, I'm pretty sure this is not what my voice would have been had I been a normal person. Uh, so, but I'm glad at least, I'm not sounding, like kapla, like I don't have that
Yeah. No,
anymore.
whatever's happened is lovely, and, there
Yeah,
are
so
there are musicians and artists out there who intentionally damage their voice to make it more interesting, so
right. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. But yeah, so
personal voice. So,
personal
let's talk
But
about that.
but yeah, so it's so funny, like, even like I said, going back to me being so vocal and so on 100 and so hyper in classes when I taught, that really wasn't the case, like, after hours, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I have a hard time convincing people that I am so socially awkward and anxious all the time, and I really don't want to people, and
Mhm.
crowds are scary and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff because they usually see me,
Mhm.
with that
Right.
face on. And so it was a really hard thing for me to even connect with myself, my own voice.
Mhm.
And the duality of it actually caused a lot of insecurity
Mhm.
to where I didn't even believe in myself
Mhm.
too much. And that actually made me quieter,
Mm.
and a little bit more reserved.
Mhm.
And so it took a while, and life circumstances, kind of compounded that. And it took a minute for me to come out of that. I feel like it felt to me like it was just this dampening field that was around me for several years. And it made it so me expressing myself
Mhm.
was just the job. And it wasn't anything that I was ever comfortable with, but I made myself do it because, again, being a person of service,
Mhm.
I knew the importance of me sharing my story and connecting with other people to maybe help them along their own journeys. But at once I was done that and I got offline, so to speak,
Mhm.
I would just crumble because I didn't have that for myself. Like all the things that I was telling people to be encouraged about and inspired by was just falling flat on me because did not I was scared. I was scared to be truthful about that with myself, you know. And as years went on, it made it even harder because, I had put on this front, so to speak, that was still me to some sort of level, but it wasn't anything that I could rely on for myself.
Mhm.
So this past couple of years, especially the last 2 years, has been really me kind of digging my own self out of that hole. And there was a little bit of guilt involved because I actually saw somewhere that I can't remember who said this, but they said, how is paraphrasing, it was, how can you offer something that you're not executing?
Ooh.
And yeah, right? Like I was
Yeah.
triggered.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, like, how do I fix this? Because I don't want to be, it almost made it feel like I was being fake about it, which,
Mm.
kind of made it all that much more worse, much more
Mhm.
worse. Don't
I'm not judging.
edit that out. Whatever. So, so I really I did really decided at that point that I needed to kind of bring myself out of that hole and to really find my own voice. If I wanted to be this for other people, I need to be
Mhm.
that for myself first.
Mhm. Mhm. So do you think that you were compelled to be that for other people? I don't know if I would use the word fake, but maybe that was just what you were aspiring to for yourself, but you just didn't know it yet.
It's possible, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. And do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, it's so hard to prove because every time I show up, it's, it's what when I first started in fitness, um, before I got named True,
Mm.
they used to call me Sasha Fierce, which was at the time Beyonce's alter ego.
Oh,
And
wow.
it really was that. Like as soon as I stepped in, it was like switch was on.
Wow.
It was no longer about me. I could not feed into how awkward and terrified I felt because I was here for them and for the job. Um,
Mhm.
but then the people that called me that actually saw me in like church.
Oh my god.
So they're like, that's not the same girl who
Wow.
literally ran me around the gym within an inch of my life. And now she's in the pew, like so demure.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so oh my gosh. But
So wait, wait,
no,
wait. How did you get the name True? So who
okay.
named you that?
So initially, like I said, when I got to teaching and training, and I started as a personal trainer, then I went into group exercise. Um, and group exercise was my home. And I went a little crazy. Like it was I enjoyed it so much, and like I said, I was so connected to the purpose of it and what I could do for anybody that came in that, things got really, really wild sometimes. And people who were coming in to the classes and, saw my name, like, oh, who's that? And it was, my government name, which we will not disclose at this time. But they would see my name on the list of classes. They're like, oh, who's that? Talking to another member. And they're like, oh, she's the truth. Like, be ready. If you're gonna take her class, just be ready. So that actually all happened like behind my back. I had no idea that people were calling me that. So yeah, that kind of stuck a little bit. And then once I found out, um, they actually, if for some reason it went from the truth to just true.
Wow.
And I decided to adopt it probably subconsciously at the time because I
Mhm.
wanted to connect that persona that they were
Mhm.
experiencing with,
Mhm.
the little insecure girl that after teaching those amazing classes used to go in her car and cry to decompress. Like I wanted those two people to be more aligned. So I ended up officially adopting that name and I had it for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, to where only HR knows my real name, but when I step into the classroom, they know me as True. And I kept that with me, in my branding and everything like that. So yeah.
Do you think that you've brought those 2 worlds together more now?
I think more now. I do believe the first time I attempted, I had a little bit of identity crisis.
Mhm.
That kind of reared its head again when I retired from fitness because I was again so connected to the work of it
Mhm. Mhm.
and that persona that when I left the work, even though again it was time for me to go and I do
Mhm.
not regret that decision, but
Mhm.
leaving that work for me felt like for a while I was leaving that person behind and I was left with, well, who am I?
Mhm.
Like without that, I felt like for a while I had no identity, and it made it way more apparent than I was willing to admit that I still had not found the security in my own voice yet at
Mm.
that time. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that is, again, yeah, the last couple of years I've been trying to rebuild that,
Yeah.
and be a little bolder.
Yes, which you are. Because look at you. You're on this podcast. That's
I
amazing.
know. Yay. I
I
think now there's moments where I just have to say, just come on, just do it.
Mhm.
Just throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. And be okay if it sucks
Mhm.
because you're here and you're real. And I think that's all I really know how to be is real, you know. So
True.
yeah.
So, speaking of being real and being true, we are kind of in this tenuous place as a culture creatively, and you're moving into a creative career. I would
Mhm.
love to hear your thoughts on moving into a creative industry at a time when things are a little tumultuous.
Yeah. This year hit hard.
Mhm.
And I said this to you, and I said it to a few other people that would listen, that it felt like now more than ever, I was primed to do something
Mhm.
than just sit here and languish and say that I don't have a voice or I don't have a place. Um, yeah, it definitely mobilized something in me. Then we'll find out what it is. So it's like an adventure. But honestly, I believe like this whole transition, I mean, and it's across the board, like socially, culturally, economically,
Yeah.
ethically, I feel we are screaming for humanity to be returned.
Mhm.
It's just such a weird place to be right now. And
Mhm.
this next 4 years, I think it's going to redefine, hopefully, if enough
Mhm.
people speak up and find their voice, like what community means and how creativity will show up and serve that. So
Yeah.
I feel really fortunate that I'm here in this space right now to be able to contribute in that way, and I see creativity and community going kind of hand in hand,
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
this. So I think people are every year just getting more and more weary. And I think the creative, innovative, caring, compassionate, real voices, like
Mhm.
this is our time,
Mhm.
to kind of collectively come together and be a part of the expansion and the expression of that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I don't know what it's going to look like, but I really feel like this is the moment to really figure that out, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. And, I met you when I met you, we were working on an AI project together.
Mm.
So how do you and you're really great at AI, so how do you see that moving into the future? Do you see it as part of your career moving forward? And how is it gonna play into everything for you?
For me, I don't feel like I always said, even though like I'm now in the design industry, I never considered myself to be an artist.
Mhm.
So an AI artist kind of landed weird on me. And
Mhm.
that is so personal because, me being self-taught and me feeling like I came into this industry very, very late, because I'm old and I don't have the what I feel like a strong foundation,
Mhm.
to even play around with that
Mhm.
and feel comfortable, like, I don't know. And again, like this could just be me because I know a lot of people just immediately adopted it and ran with it. And that just didn't feel really stable to me. Like when I first got introduced to AI, and that was 2 years ago, I had fun with it. Like I
Mhm.
love the idea of getting even more that was in my head kind of out.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it terrified me because, like I said, I had no real foundation in it. I didn't consider myself an artist. So for me to put stuff out there, like I felt so illegitimate in the whole
Mm.
thing. But with that being said, like again, we talk about, the impact of AI and the need for it to be utilized ethically. And I think there's still going to be a lot of people that are just not going to put the work in to make that the reality. And
Mhm.
again, that still comes back to, what I see for us in the future, if more of us, that care deep enough start speaking out more. Because
Mhm.
I think the balance is more shifted towards the people who just want to be seen, or
Mhm.
just want to go viral, or just want to do like the look what I can do, and not really thinking deep into the after effects of all of that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The why behind it.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I joke, and I joke, but I don't want to disrespect anybody, but we saw like so many Roco robots, and I mean, it was just such an uncanny explosion of the same thing over and over again,
Mhm.
just in regards to aspects of AI
Mhm.
art. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
That that type of saturation was just why? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so I really feel as though if we're going to continue with this, we have to make it matter.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. You might say people need to have their own personal voice in their work.
yes. And even with
Yeah.
me, when I created things with AI,
Mhm.
I literally, because I don't know how to not touch stuff.
Right.
I would pull it into another editing, uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just literally completely redesign it, so it was never what the machine rendered. It was
Right.
always, leveled up, because
Yeah.
I wanted that identity to be mine.
Mhm.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I completely understand.
Yeah.
Um, you and I talked about one of your favorite books called, I believe it's a 5 second rule. Do I have that right?
5-second rule.
Five
Yes.
second rule. So why is this one of your favorite books?
I love hate that book. Imma tell you why. Um So Mel Robbins, love her. She's so motivational, and I followed her for a while, and I read a few of her books, but the 5-second rule was the first one that I read, and that was a part of my whole. I'm trying to define myself and be stronger and more resilient in my own
Right.
life.
Yeah.
Um, but with that book, the premise of it, and I'm sure everybody knows what it is, but just in case you don't, so the premise of it is basically to get up and just do things. The
Mhm.
thing that you're afraid of, the thing that you think are holding you back. If you were to count down from 5 to 1, as soon as you get to 1, you are to do the thing, whatever
Mhm.
that thing is.
Mhm.
And it was a great tactic because it went from, I would say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I would go do that thing. Great.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then it got to where I would say 5, and it was like, oh my God, it was almost like Pavlov's dog,
Wow.
where as soon as I heard myself, because you would say it out loud, as soon as I
Yeah.
heard myself say 5, I was like, oh, let me go do the thing. Right. So it worked. It
Yeah.
worked. But you have to be ready for it, because I would be lying if I didn't say I would just not count just to avoid that traumatic experience. But yeah, that messaging stuck with me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, you know, to where it kind of, it was almost like a do it scared kind of thing. Like, it doesn't
Right.
matter how you feel about it in the moment. Um, just get in there.
Yeah.
So it was the kind of like a little bit of a push to do things that you might not be 100% comfortable with. But you do it anyway, and it seems to work out at some point. And if it doesn't, it's a learning experience. And I think that was the progression that, was probably the main point of all of that. So yeah, every so often I do count in my head.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of talk about this with your fitness journey too, but that idea of discomfort doesn't mean avoid always.
Now,
Sometimes it just means you're going to go through something and come out the other side different.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So, as you are moving into this new career and you're finding your voice physically and just in your own work in your future, in the next 5 years, where do you see yourself or where do you want to go?
Oh my God.
It's a big question.
It's a big question. It's a big question because, you know, I was never brave enough to even say that for myself, like to
Wow.
make those type of decisions. And now, like all of those big questions coming to me, they feel so new and so big. And I feel like I'm unprepared, and I'm so used to the we'll just see what happens kind of thing,
Mhm.
that actually having a plan seems weird. But I do hope that whatever it is, again, that it matters, that it serves in some way, that it makes somebody better, and
Mhm.
hopefully in turn make me a better person for it. But I want to be able to express myself in a way um that shows an example of a life lived better,
Mhm.
um, more connected. I'm getting better at peopling, so
Mhm. Mhm.
I really want whatever I do to impact the heart in some way.
Mhm.
And I want to be able, and this is going to sound really, really odd because you're like, well, she doesn't like talking. I really want to help others
Mhm.
find what I am finding. I'm not even claiming that I found it yet, but I would like to help others on this journey as I'm like digging through and unpacking all of this insecure, anxious mess. I would love to be able to take somebody else by the hand and say, let's go find out what happens if we just,
Yeah.
open our mouths and finally speak up. So
So if you were to at this point, if you met little True, what would you tell her?
keep being weird. Cause little True was loud as all get out. She was definitely she didn't care how odd she was. Um, she loved the stories that came out of her head.
Mhm.
She didn't really have any type of awareness of the judgment that might come with
Mm.
that.
Mhm.
And she was okay with sucking every so often
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
messing up and tripping. She actually found that funny. Uh, and somewhere along the line, I kind of
Mhm.
lost that. So I would tell her, definitely tell her to fight harder
Mhm.
to keep that
Mhm.
because we lost it for quite some time.
Understood.
Yeah.
So, let's just say that you could have anybody you wanted on the podcast.
Ooh.
Who's your dream guest?
Mm,
This
there
is
is there's one person that I have considered being a mentor, and he came into my life during my whole fitness history.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the impact that he had on my life, it stays even today. And I don't get to speak to him very often, but I always have his little messages running through my head. His name is Pepper Vaughn,
Mhm.
and he's just an amazing human, so kind. You want to talk about being a person of service?
Mm.
The compassion that man possesses is outstanding and is something that I've always aspired to be.
Mhm.
But I have a feeling that if I were to talk to him about this, in the podcast, I would probably cry the entire hour. Um, but he's my favorite person. He's taught me more than I'm sure he's even aware of. But yeah, I would love to connect it with him on that, I think.
So tell me, what kind of work does Pepper Von do?
He is in fitness, which is
Oh,
that's where I met him, yes,
uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
he's been in the game for decades and decades, like, he's iconic, in that regard, and I met him, going to fitness conferences, connected with him. He started his own fitness program, and, I got certified in that and was
Mhm,
really connected with him that way,
mhm,
and I became part of, his performance team for a little bit when he did other conferences and things like that. So
mhm, mhm.
yeah, yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing.
Okay. Well, he's added to the list.
I knew that was coming.
He's added to the list. So, we are actually at the 45-minute mark, and
Crazy, I
I would
survived.
you survived, and if there's anybody who is listening to this that would like to put a question in the chat, or if you would like to turn on your camera and speak to Tru directly, you're welcome to do that now. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm gonna ask you one more question. Oh, hi, Hannah. Do you have a question before I
I
dig in?
do. I
Okay,
Ah,
shoot.
do. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your journey and your perspective because I think so many of us have this nervousness and this anxiety, and that just comes with existence on this planet. Um, and I just I wanted to ask the question of when you are feeling this way and you've been through all the challenges that you have been through, what is the inner voice telling you that helps you keep going and trying?
I think for me, a little bit of it definitely comes from what I want to be able to provide for others. But I think now more than even it was in the past, what the thing that comes up in my head is that I want to be better. I want to be better for me. Um, so yeah, I think saying that and really believing that I have the capacity to do that, I think is what gets me to do the things that I am afraid to do.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions, and so I have one final question for you, Tru.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's kind of in two parts, but one, where can people find you on the interwebs if they'd like to connect with you or talk with you about community or what you're doing creatively?
Okay. So I live online more than I probably should. So they can find me on Instagram
Mhm,
at True at Art, and that is TRU with no E, with a dot, AT with a dot, ART. Um, and they can find me on LinkedIn by Tru Adams.
mhm.
Yeah. And design wise, it's those two places I try to engage and connect. Of course, I could probably do better, but those are the places that they can find me. Or if they want to see how weird my work is, they can actually go to my portfolio website, which is at www.trueatart.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so my closing question for you
Yeah,
is in
I'm
this
ready.
jour
I'm ready,
are you
Heather. I'm
ready?
ready.
Okay, this is it. This is it. You've almost made it through.
Like Final Jeopardy. Let's go.
All right. So, but as you're finding your voice and you're learning to speak up for yourself and move into your truth about who you are and what you really want, as you're continuing this journey and at the same time you want to mentor and build community, what advice would you give to someone who is in a similar position you were, let's say, at the beginning of your fitness journey and is just waking up to the idea that they want to be better, that they want to be more, that they have a calling in their heart that they want to follow, but they're just feeling hesitant about doing it?
I think it actually just starts with having the belief in yourself, and I know that probably sounds very generic and cliche, but nothing is going to happen, and I'm proof of that. Like, I've done it's like several things, like, I've gone out and done it, and I really feel like a lot of the times that wasn't sustainable for me because I did it in the crisis of not believing in myself.
Mhm.
So none of those things held for very long, because I was not really confident on what I was doing
Mhm.
and thinking that I wasn't enough while I was doing it. So I think that has to be where it starts. And maybe I kind of came at it kind of sideways and probably why it took a little bit of time. Um, but I really believe that you have to stop being afraid of what your capacity is, regardless of your training, because I nothing that I've done in my adult life, as far as career wise, has been traditionally trained. Like, I did not go to school for any of this. You know what I mean? And I think that came with its own set of insecurities. But that doesn't have to be the case. Like, I had to actually start validating what I know and what I could learn, and I think that's where you have to start, believing that you have the capacity to do those things and to not be afraid of the success of it,
Mhm.
along with not being afraid to fail. Don't be afraid of succeeding. You've heard that before, but that rings true so much more than people give it credit for. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot more people than admit it are afraid to succeed in things, and
Mhm.
they end up self-sabotaging when
Mhm.
they see good things coming towards them. I know I've done that plenty of times, but you have to be in the frame of mind to get over that and believe that you are supposed to be where you are, and you have to own that space and love yourself in that space.
Mhm. I love that. That's beautiful. Well, True, thank you so much for talking with me
Thank
today.
you.
It is such an honor to have you on the podcast and learn more about you. And I really do encourage the listeners to please go check out True's amazing site and her amazing voice. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful week.